Most of us have an idea of we believe, we think where we should be going as a species, but we don't even have a clue of who we are and why we are here. So once you can find a line that goes back in human history, and you can start tracing back our origins and the truth about who we are and how we've landed up in this place, it's a lot easier to follow the line and see how we can project that into the future and improve on what it is that we've been doing until now.
Welcome to the Sustainable Living Podcast. Tips, tools, and tactics for living a heart-centered life that honors Mother Earth and her inhabitants. The information shared on the Sustainable Living Podcast reflects the opinions of host Marian West, Janice Fryatt, and their guests. Please use your own discretion in research before applying any information to your individual situation. Now, here are your hosts, Marian and Janice.
Welcome to the podcast, everyone. I'm Janice Fryatt, and the voice you just heard before the intro was that of Michael Tellinger. I became aware of Michael by watching the internet subscription channel Gaia, where he can be seen on several interview shows as well as on his own series, Hidden Origins. On these shows, Michael pulls together disparate pieces of information to weave a new tale about our ancient past as well as our possible future. His investigation of the ancient stone circle structures found near his home of South Africa resulted in 3 books: Temples of the African Gods, Slave Species of God, and Adam's Calendar. In those books, he shares the research that led him to his theory about the real purpose of these structures and his conclusion that human civilization is likely much older than scientists have previously believed. Michael's research also led him to found the Ubuntu movement, an effort that seeks to promote a contributionist economy. Not long ago, I interviewed Brandon Shalton, who heads up the Ubuntu US One Small Town effort. But in this episode, we discussed the need to question what we've been taught, why our monetary system isn't serving humankind, what Ubuntu is, and how it would change daily life for humans, and what Michael is doing to spread the Ubuntu message. So without further ado, here's that interview. A big welcome to you, Michael.
Hello, Janice. Lovely to be speaking to you, and I look forward to our chat.
Yeah, well, I've been a fan for some time, watching you on Gaia and learning a lot. So before we get into some of the stuff that I've learned, could you please share a brief summary of your own story? What brought you to this place in your life?
I think like anyone in my situation, I was just never happy with the answers I was getting from my school teachers and my university lecturers and the establishment. It was just never enough. It was always, a watered down version of what I believed the truth to be. So I was always exploring myself and looking for more answers and more information and more knowledge. And the moment you open that door and go down that rabbit hole, then there's no turning back.
Yeah. Well, for you, a lot of people go down the rabbit hole and like me, it really amounts to just kind of doing a lot of research online. But you went out there in the field and did a lot of stuff. I mean, you were out there researching these stone circles in southern Africa, and you came to the realization that history wasn't really what we were taught. One of the things that you have said on many occasions is that we are a species with amnesia. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, the species with amnesia is a phrase that was actually coined many years ago by Graham Hancock. I only discovered that recently. So it really explains or defines humanity that doesn't know who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. If we were a conscious group of beings that handed down our knowledge through the millennia, as you know, our shamanic brothers and sisters do, and the secret knowledge keepers or the keepers of the knowledge in the native communities around the world that have been doing this for thousands of years, that information has been kept there and handed down for thousands of years. But our governments and our mainstream media and our school system and our universities have very quickly removed that information and knowledge from our psyche and from our society. So it has become evident that there, especially in the last 500 years, since the so-called explorers left Europe to explore the world, there were nothing more or nothing less than just invaders and pillagers that went on a rampage of invading and pillaging and stealing land and wealth and everything from the native people of the world. Mm-hmm. And with that, destroyed all their cultural knowledge, destroyed all their writings or the books wherever they found them, and replaced them with Eurocentric books and Eurocentric thinking, in essence, cutting the people off from their ancestors, cutting them off from their ancestral knowledge so they could no longer pass on that information and knowledge. And that's what has led in the last 500 years to the rapid erosion of a deeper sense of understanding who we are and where we come from as a species, and turning us today, everyone alive pretty much, and our children, that we just propagate the same kind of ignorance. It's turned us into a species with amnesia. We don't know who we are, where we come from, and why we're here.
Well, as one example, as a result of your work, you've come to the conclusion that civilization is much older than historians thought and than what we're taught in school. So I have to ask you, in your opinion, how much of history and science, how much of that we have been taught can be trusted?
Well, Janice, 10 years ago, I would have told you a very different answer than I'm going to tell you now. But what I find is that the more I learn, the more I discover, the more I realize how much knowledge and information has been hidden from us. So it is just truly a never-ending rabbit hole that just goes deeper and deeper. And I truly believe now that we know less about our human origins than we've ever imagined. And pretty much everything we've been told has been manipulated, has been coated, has been twisted to suit an agenda of those that have been ruling and manipulating humanity for a long time. So, and that I'm talking about everything from spiritual, religious, scientific, astronomy, history, all areas of knowledge have been tampered with and manipulated. So it is like a great new awakening for humanity right now, as people discover this and realize that, everything we've been told is a lie. That people are discovering new areas of information that feed them with a sense of that resonates more with anything else that we've been told before. And that's a very exciting time in human history. It's really fantastic that we are going through this process now. More and more people are uniting in spirit, uniting in higher levels of consciousness and an understanding that we are opening a new page to realizing who we are, where we come from, and why we are here, and dealing with what is often what I often describe as the terrible truth, because it gets really dark and sinister and unbelievable and like a sci-fi horror movie. But if that's the real history that is, transpired here, then that's what we need to deal with and move beyond it and change it. And that's really what I've been working towards with the Ubuntu movement, is creating a new reality and a new future for humanity.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and I think you're completely right. I do believe there is a new awakening happening right now. You're really seeing it all around you, but you're obviously not seeing it on the mainstream media because that's against their agenda, so they're not going to talk about that. But it is an exciting time. However, we do have to look at the ugly stuff. And it is disturbing. It's very disturbing. Why is it so important that we get this right? Why is it so important that we get history and science right and not continue looking away from all the ugly stuff?
Well, looking at the ugly stuff doesn't mean we have to immerse ourselves in it and get all depressed by it and freaked out by it. It's just information. We need to know who we are and where we come from so that we can understand where it is that we should be going. Most of us have an idea of we believe, we think where we should be going as a species, but we don't even have a clue of who we are and why we are here. So once you can find a line that goes back in human history, and you can start tracing back our origins and the truth about who we are, and how we've landed up in this place, it's a lot easier to follow the line and see how we can project that into the future and improve on what it is that we've been doing until now, or how we have been manipulated and messed about and controlled. It becomes a lot easier to realize, once you know what the levels of control are and what parts of our lives and our humanity and our DNA and our reality are being controlled, then it's much easier to figure out what we should be doing.
Well, I'm reminded of that saying, those who don't study history are bound to repeat it. That one always made me laugh, because we are always studying history, but we are always repeating it. So I don't know if
Absolutely.
I don't know if that works,
Yeah.
but and how does that fit in when the history that we're taught is just not even true anyway?
Exactly. Well, this is why in the Ubuntu movement, I make it very clear that we have to do something completely different, something that's never been done before. We've got to break this repetitive cycle of history. Mm-hmm. And that's why I guess so many people are getting excited about it. And we're reaching, larger and larger numbers of people that are waking up and realizing that there's so much more to be learned and to be experienced and so much to be excited about.
Mm-hmm. And I think you probably come up against the problem of people just not being able to envision anything different. This has been something we've all been immersed in for generations, and nobody can remember a time when it wasn't like this whole money system. And you do a very good job of explaining what the problem with money and our current economic system is. Could you kind of share a little bit of that here right now?
Well, everything about the system is wrong from its very foundation, its very beginnings, the way it works, what it does, what it's intended to be, the origins of money, those that control it. Everything about the entire money system flies in the face of every ounce of our humanness, because it is nothing more or nothing less than an enslavement system. It is a tool that was created and inserted into humanity as a tool of enslavement and a tool of manipulation. It is not a tool that's supposed to help humanity survive and reach greater heights. How is that possible when it restricts every step we make, when it cuts us off wherever we want to go and prevents us from doing what we want to do, and the dreams we have as children get shut down and destroyed by money? Clearly, it's obviously not there to help humanity. So, people don't know or for as long as people don't know what money is, where it comes from, how it was created, and how it was manipulated and controlled, and how people have been manipulated by this control for thousands of years, probably around 6,000 years at this stage, based on my research. For as long as people don't know this, they will continue believing and thinking that somehow money is there to help us. And without money, we can't survive and we won't be able to do things. It's a form of exchange. It's just an energy. And you hear all kinds of lame excuses that people give this thing because they're not brave enough to imagine a world without money. Mm-hmm. So that's really why when I say we need to do something completely different into the future, that's what this is all about, is removing money from the system is the main thing. Because for as long as we have money in our lives, on this planet, in the world, to control humanity, we will forever be divided, we'll be controlled and manipulated, because there'll be those that will take control of this money thing and they will manipulate the rest of humanity with their control of it. And any form of exchange, any form of bartering or trading or exchange is the same kind of system. So people often get confused. They think, yes, we must get rid of money and go back to bartering and trading. And the immediate answer to that is absolutely not. So it is something very different. We need to move away from that completely, because you're still exchanging values. I have a cow and I believe my cow is worth, 100 chickens. So I'm not going to give you my cow unless you can give me 100 chickens. Mm-hmm. And then you realize that is not a solution, because he who has more cows will rule the roost. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you've really you're putting the finger on kind of this exchange of material goods that we do. And it may take the form of money, or it may take the form of barter, but whenever it is used, it's not good. It's enslaving us. It's keeping us down. It's making us more controllable.
There'll always be somebody that'll have, more stuff to trade with, and that person will then be in charge and have more control to abuse and have it his or her way, to control the rest of the people and determine the conditions of what's going, and how this trade is going to happen. So that's not a solution. So we have to come up with something very different. And the Ubuntu system, or the contributionism system, that is really a modern version of what Ubuntu is. So the contribution system, which is a word that I came up with in around 2005, it gets rid of all of that preconceived idea that we have to trade and barter and do all that stuff, because it's completely nonsensical. As long as I contribute my talents and skills to the community, and everybody does that, we will have so much more than we could possibly imagine. And if we start working collectively, contributing our times and energy for the benefit of everyone in our community and not just yourself, you see how quickly this changes. And that doesn't mean you have to become a slave to the community. It actually means that you attain absolute freedom and absolute autonomy and absolute sovereignty, and are respected for who you are and what you do and what you contribute towards your community. Because every one of us is born with special talents and skills and abilities, and every one of us is very unique in those talents and skills and abilities. And that's what you should be experiencing and enjoying throughout your life, while allowing others to experience and enjoy your talents and skills and abilities.
Do you mind if we go a little bit into the history of this? Because I remember watching your show on Gaia, and I got the impression, I don't know if you actually said this specifically, but I got the impression from watching you that this kind of contribution kind of society really thrived for a long time. It was something that is a lot older and lasted a lot longer than bartering or any kind of materialistic exchange. Am I right?
Yes. That was a very interesting discovery, and a few years ago. It's quite recent, by archaeologists, and I can't remember the names now, but I read an in-depth article about this, and one of the major sort of magazines, either National Geographic or Discovery, or one of those. And they found that some of the ancient cultures that they excavated and explored and uncovered, they found evidence that those people in those communities did not participate in bartering or trading, that they just lived in a community working and providing for each other. And I suspect that bartering and trading must have come a lot later, when the Europeans probably started traveling the world, or people from around the world started exploring greater areas, and they started to travel and needed a place to stay. So they would stay somewhere, people would look after them, and they'd leave behind a horse or a camel or whatever as a form of gratitude. And I suspect that the whole bartering and trading may have evolved out of that kind of activity rather than the other way around. So initially,
it's interesting because you're describing a situation in which you are with strangers. You're with people you don't know. You're out of your community.
Yes.
And so you're finding another way to interact with them that is not your normal way with your community.
Yes. If you stay within a community and you contribute towards your community, your contribution remains in that community, and you don't go anywhere. You continue contributing towards that community, so that you're a valuable or a participating contributor towards the benefit of everyone in your community, whether you're a baker or scientist, a material scientist, a healer or educator, or whatever. You're contributing with your talents and skills for the benefit of everyone. So contributionism is not a one-to-one exchange. It's a one-to-many exchange. If I'm a healer, I'm not just going to heal you and then you do something for me. I heal everyone in my community because that's what I do, and I love doing it, and that's why I chose to do this, because it comes easy and naturally to me. And so everybody benefits from my abilities, and that goes for the scientist, for the shoemaker, for the baker, for the musicians that play for everyone, not just one-on-one. I think actually music is a very nice way to express that kind of one-to-many exchange, right? You've got a handful of musicians on stage, and they're performing and providing a service for 1,000 people sitting looking at them, right? And those 1,000 people aren't really doing anything in return. They're just sitting there absorbing and receiving the gift of the musicians. And then when those people go away, they then carry on doing what they're doing. And whether one of those people could be the baker that actually provides the food for the musicians that were able to to stay alive so they could perform.
And this reminds me of something else that you said in the Gaia program was you gave this example of how when you meet somebody new, you might invite them over to your house for a barbecue.
Yes.
And you've got they come over, you say, hey, there's the beer, go grab it, and here's some barbecue. And you don't go, hey, now it's $100 for the beer and the barbecue. You do it because it feels good.
Exactly.
And then after on Monday, you get in your car and you go to work and you drive because you have to make a whole bunch of money, and you're making sure you get there on time. You're all stressed out, and it resonated with me because it's the feeling that you have when you give to people that is, it's such a wonderful feeling, and we don't have enough of that. And it just seems to me like we need to follow our feelings more.
So you can imagine, the people that love to barbecue, or people that love to cook, and the great chefs that we have in the world, they would love to cook food. And if they can do it without having to make money to survive, can you imagine the incredible food that would be served by the cooks that are passionate and really talented in that field?
Yeah.
So you can imagine how well we'll be eating in our community, because we'll be providing so much food, so much abundance from the greater community of anything that we choose to provide. And if we don't have enough shrimp, then we'll go bloody breed some more shrimp. That might be a terrible example, but if we, I'm using some of the exotic examples because people often think, oh, well, we're not going to have lobster and shrimp and caviar, the stuff that's really expensive today. So really? No, actually, that's the stuff that we're going to get more of because you'll free people up to go and we're not going to pollute the oceans and pollute our rivers and dams and lakes, because capitalism and the whole industrial insanity that we've gone through has poisoned our land, poisoned our rivers and lakes and our waters, and poisoned our air. Now that's going to stop because we no longer need factories to mine and make materials that are insane, because we'll have different new materials created by material scientists that are made from an understanding of resonance and mixing hemp with graphene, with silica, and giving us materials that are infinitely stronger and durable and recyclable than anything else we are mining or producing today. So what we're doing, in essence, in our contributionist communities is unleashing the minds of the scientists and the inventors to do whatever they're good at and supporting them on every level so that we can create anything we choose to do that benefits the entire community and keeps improving our relationship with the environment and nature around us.
Oh, it's amazing what you can do when you change that objective from profits to the betterment of mankind,
Yeah.
It's the profits that are eating up all of our resources. We've basically commodified everything on the planet, and pretty soon there really won't be anything left for us to sell. So yeah, we really do have to find different systems here. So with Ubuntu, can you share a little bit about how it differs from other economic alternatives? And I guess I really want to point out, for instance, communism. Whenever people bring up a new system, everyone wants to know if it's related at all to communism. So let's talk about that. Would you address that?
Yeah, look, it's one of the frequently asked questions. It's the people find out about us, and then they read a little bit about it, and they realize we want to take money out of the system, think, oh, this is just another communistic plot. It's like, no. Obviously, when people say this kind of thing, first of all, they don't know what communism is, how it came about, who was behind it, and they don't realize that communism and capitalism are basically the same brutal dictatorships. They just differ slightly in their implementation. So communism is just a brutal dictatorship that was imposed on humanity by the banking families. It was sugar-coated by the beautiful propaganda that went along with it, and it's got absolutely nothing to do as far as benefiting humanity. It's got everything about giving the absolute control to the government and a few dictators that control the rest of the people. We're doing completely the opposite. And also, every other system we've had, whether it's capitalism, communism, socialism, fascism, who knows, whatever else there is, all of those systems work on money. They still all use money. In a contributionist society, we work towards eradicating the money from the system. In fact, the fully fledged contributionist society has no money in it whatsoever. And once you reach that state, it is impossible to reintroduce money into that system. And I hope you realize this, Janice. Once we have a contributionist community functioning, nobody will ever be able to reintroduce money into that system, because it'll be a complete and utter assault on those people, and they will see from a mile away that individual is trying to take control of their community and of the people individually. So that's the difference, the very, very vast difference between contributionism and any other ism we've ever had. You cannot compare any of them.
And one thing that really sticks out for me is that the capitalism and communism are very top-down approaches. They're approaches that are imposed by an elite onto the people, whereas this really does seem more of a bottom-up approach.
Yeah, it's a people-driven system. People in the communities decide what is best for the community, and not someone sitting in some ivory tower that says what you can and cannot do. And that's how our lives, our towns, our communities, our countries have been stolen by the corporate elite and the banking families that have hijacked this world from us.
Yeah, well, it's very hard for us to even imagine any kind of system that gives us more freedom and not less.
Yeah.
So again, you have to kind of spell this stuff out for people. And along those lines, maybe could you share a little bit in a hypothetical Ubuntu community, what would the average day be like for a person?
Well, pretty much you're free to do whatever you love to do. So what do you think people will be driven towards? What do you think people are drawn towards when they wake up in the morning? You don't have to worry about bills to pay, about finding food, about surviving, about anything that currently puts us under situations of stress and worrying and misery and anxiety, all the horrible things that give us disease at the same time, that, all the major diseases that people we find ourselves taking on these days is all because of the system and the society we find ourselves in. The stress and the anxiety imposed on humanity is the major driver of the illness that has befallen humanity. Mm-hmm. So when you wake up and you know that you live in a community that completely supports you and you support it, you automatically follow your passions. You follow what you love to do. Now, if you are a closet material scientist and you keep seeing new materials by looking around you, and you're constantly wondering what would happen if you combine this particular stone with that plant, and combine the silica with the fiber of this plant, and do it in an organic way that doesn't produce any pollutants or side effects that poison the world, you'll be constantly creating new and incredible materials that benefit humanity, from clothing to building materials to whatever you can imagine. So the working place or environment that you will have would be a number of people that think like you, that have a laboratory or a workplace or a workshop or or a manufacturing place that you sit and do these experiments and create. If you like to work with horses, then you go and work with horses. And you will probably be breeding horses that benefit the community, and everyone has access to that, and so forth. And then once a week, you go and do some community work, whatever is necessary to be done for the community. And that's how the system is structured. So everybody needs to contribute a little bit of time every week. And in the contributionist model, we've made it 3 hours a week. So that 3 hours a week, you go and work for whatever needs to be done in the town, in your community, that may not be looked after or done by the individual activities of the people. And that creates an incredible platform and a labor force to create, manufacture, grow, whatever you imagine, whatever we choose to do for our community, whether it's building supercomputers, whether it's growing all kinds of food, whether it's building music studios or dance halls, artistic studios, whatever it is we choose to do, we'll be able to do because we have the collective willing labor force that have chosen to do this together.
And it sounds like you're creating an economy that's impervious to, ups and downs of, what's going on outside of the community.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The abundance in such a community it's unimagineable to anyone in a capitalist environment or in a capitalist town or city or a village. It's just... It just turns everything upside down on its head and starts to improve the lives and lifestyle of everyone immediately.
Yeah, well, I would imagine the biggest thing that would improve everything would be that you just have a community that you're in touch with and that you're doing things with. You're not isolated in your house trying to live your quiet life of desperation, watching TV for relief. Yeah. You're out and you're making bonds, you're making friendships and relationships that support you in many ways that we're not supported right now.
Exactly. So you can just imagine the people that love to work with wood, the carpenters, and wood is a renewable source. We can be growing as many trees as we need or want to be able to build everything out of wood, or create new materials that you don't need to grow trees, and just let your mind run wild. But the incredible talents and skills of people are completely destroyed by the capitalist model, because remember, it's not about people being allowed to create and invent and produce for the benefit of everyone else. It's about what they're told to do so that it benefits the bottom line and creates as much money as possible. So that's not the same. Those are two very distinctly different and opposing philosophies and ideologies. So suddenly we're growing food well beyond our wildest imagination. We'll never be able to eat all the food, but that's fine. Food, we recycle the food. It becomes compost that helps us to grow other beautiful things and beautify our environment. And whatever we don't use just gets recycled, because in an Ubuntu community, in a contributionist system, everything that we do is renewable, recyclable. Nothing goes to waste.
So it's a closed loop system.
Yeah. It is. It is. And remember that what we do, we always choose before we start doing something. You're not going to do something unless you love to do it or you want to do it. No one's going to force you to do it. No one's going to be standing there saying, "Listen, if you do this, I'll give you $100." So that no longer applies. So nobody's going to be able to tell you, well, why don't you do this? And then I can make sure that you sit higher up on the council or whatever. And you go, well, why should I do that? And why should I want you to sit higher up on the council? So, well, this whole manipulation, bribing, extortion, corruption, there's no place for that to take hold. It's impossible for any of that kind of ugly, undermining activity that we find in politics, in business today. That just completely dissolves and vanishes from our reality.
Yeah, and it sounds like, I think you did talk about this on your show, about the concept of collaboration versus competition, and how important collaboration is, and how detrimental competition has been. And I so wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that also raises again, that point that we were talking about originally about the importance of knowing our history, because it seems to me that a lot of this fervor for competition and how wonderful it is and how everything's going to be wonderful if we all compete comes from the idea of survival of the fittest, this theory of evolution.
Yes.
That I think there's been a lot of research out there to counteract that idea that that's really the main way that we evolved. And if you understand that collaboration played a lot bigger part in our evolution, then maybe going forward we can kind of see, well, maybe this competition thing isn't all it's cracked up to be,
No, it's not. In fact, it's the opposite. Competition will lead to the destruction of humanity, the way that competition is imposed on us today through a capitalist model. There's a subtle difference between competition within a collaborative structure, but without some sort of a domineering and a dominating outcome of it. So let me give you an example. If in a contributionist, in our little contributionist town, for example, we have a science lab that's developing new materials, all right, and I, as the senior person in that laboratory or research venue, says, listen, let's have a little fun here. Let's divide us up into teams and see which team comes up with the best new material in the next 2 months. And then they start playing and they start looking at different ways of creating new materials. And after 2 months, we come together and we share what we've done in our individual capacities. And everyone laughs and goes, wow, that's amazing. I didn't think about that. And they look at your invention and your creations and they marvel at what you did because they didn't think about that. And in the end, you throw it all together and you pool it and you actually extract the best out of that and use that for the benefit of the whole team and the entire town and the entire community. You're not going to then take that and hide it so that you can manufacture it and sell it to the people. Can you see the difference?
Oh, absolutely. It sounds like what you're describing is a collaborative version of competition, which actually would be fun.
Yes, exactly. So people often think that by going this route, you destroy this spirit of competition and people trying to improve themselves. Not at all. In fact, you open up the spirit of people trying to improve themselves and trying to create, because ultimately that is the fundamental nature of the human spirit. The fundamental human nature is to create. From the first moment we are born as little babies, we're already creating. We're making noises, we're making sounds, we're making shapes with our fingers, blowing bubbles with our mouths, and doing things and experiencing and creating as we experience and interact with our environment. From the earliest of babies that we start doing this. And then remember that starts getting beaten out of us. As we grow older, we explore and try and do this and do that. And then we said, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that's only because of the kind of society we've created around ourselves. So we put such very, very, I guess, strict restrictions on our children or as we grow up. So that changes completely. And the kind of environment that children, for example, would find themselves in is that we can't even imagine it today, because today everyone is so bloody scared that their children get abducted or raped or abused or whatever. So now suddenly your child actually belongs to the entire community, and the whole community looks after the children. And the children will be growing up in the safest possible environment, experiencing that absolute freedom that we can't imagine today. And the kind of learning and experiential interaction that the kids will have growing up in a contributionist Ubuntu community is unimaginable to us today.
Well, and you know what, that brings up a question for me, and that is, how is crime dealt with in an Ubuntu community?
Well, that's one of the frequently asked questions. And, if people that listen to this, I urge them to go and get a copy of the Ubuntu book and read it, because most of these questions are covered in there, because these are all questions that come from a capitalist system, as you obvious, right? And so that obviously going to change dramatically. So firstly, ask yourself, why do people commit crime? Before anyone can answer any of the questions that they may come up with, first ask, why does that specific thing happen? And how will that happen in a world without money? Will we still have the need for cars, for example? Will we have the need for X, Y, and Z? And then take a step back and realize that it's probably going to be very, very different. In fact, everything changes. When you take money out of the system, everything changes. Where we live, how we live, who we interact, how we interact, what clothes we wear, what food we grow, how we grow the food, who grows the food, what technology we use to grow the food, the materials we use, the kind of entertainment we have. Everything changes because money no longer controls the guidelines and the outcomes of what we do. So if you have everything you need, if you live in a house that's designed specifically for you out of the kind of material that you like, by the town planners and the architects of the town, because that's what they do, because that's what they've chosen to do, and they love doing that, right? So if you live in a town, in your community, and the clothes you have are all made for you, the furniture you have is all made for you, the garden you have is your garden, otherwise you participate in the greater community garden, and everything you have is there because it's yours and you've chosen to have it. It's custom made for you. We're in a capitalist community. Nobody can afford custom made things anymore, right? So suddenly you have everything that is yours. And why would you want to go and steal or break in or do anyone any harm if you have everything you need, right? So crime virtually disappears, absolutely just disappears.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. It makes sense that crime would be greatly reduced, but you'd probably occasionally get something. And,
of course.
In that case, how would you deal with it?
Yeah, so the answer to that is that the Council of Elders and the community is going to have to deal with that individual that has committed a crime against the community. And it will be dealt with in a way that they decide to deal with. I can't prescribe or predict how that should be dealt with. Otherwise, I become the same kind of dictator that we have today. So all I can say is that I don't know how the community will deal with it. It all depends what kind of crime it is and what that person has done. And that community, under the level of consciousness that they occupy or that they embrace, will then decide through the Council of Elders that represent the will and guide the community, guide the needs of the community, will then decide with the rest of the community, what are we going to do with this individual and how are we going to handle it? And how that's going to happen, I can't really tell. I've got some ideas of my own, obviously, but it'll probably differ from community to community.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I asked the question because it does bring up a really important point, which is that each Ubuntu community has a great deal it has their own autonomy. Yep. They're free to decide how they're going to deal with whatever they're going to deal with.
Yeah. And again, it's all the crime committed today, most of the crime committed today is because of money. It's all about money or people under pressure situations and they do something they wouldn't normally do. And it's all about survival, just people trying to survive because they just don't fit into this insane capitalist world. And they just want to live and be happy and survive.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then they start doing stupid and crazy things. And before you know, they become career criminals and that's all they are. They're trapped in the cycle. And so in many ways, the contributionist system is a huge resolve for all the ills of society that we have today, all the dysfunctional aspects of our society, the crimes, the drug abuse, all that stuff will disappear.
Yeah, well, it makes a lot of sense because, again, yes, your material needs are being met, which is huge, but your emotional needs, a lot of your emotional needs are being met that aren't being met right now because you've got that wonderfully supportive community, which we don't have anymore, which is huge.
And think about relationships. I mean, today people meet under stressful conditions. People meet under unnatural conditions and environments. You meet someone and you're sort of forced into a situation, and people end up in relationships that are almost driven by the capitalist model. It's like an extension of capitalism is a reflection of our relationships today. While in a community where everybody knows everybody else, by the time you're 16 years old, you know exactly what your talents are, and you're already probably contributing and benefiting your entire community with what your skills and talents are, and you will automatically start to resonate with members of the opposite sex or or who knows, the same sex. That's an interesting question. How is that going to affect? How is homosexuality going to be affected in a contributive society? That is a really interesting philosophical discussion, and how that will unfold and evolve. But you'll find a partner that you completely resonate with, that that you have a complete connection with, that it becomes very difficult to break, and nobody is going to tell you, oh, you can't be with that person, or suddenly you get ripped apart. You think about the many sort of young loves that relationships that are formed today, and then suddenly they're broken apart because one of the people gets a job in a city far away and they have to take it because otherwise they got no money. So suddenly you break these people up, and they end up brokenhearted for the rest of their lives, and going and settling down with partners that was their second choice.
Well, what comes to my mind is that you're really giving humans much more liberty and much more freedom. And the older I get and the more that I meditate and I go inward, the more I realize that it's that freedom that allows us to evolve. We evolve as individuals, the more freedom we have to make mistakes and to do whatever we're going to do on our own, rather than being forced into doing something or forced to learn something. The more we're able to pursue the things that interest us and kind of have freedom, I think that accelerates our evolution.
Oh, absolutely. It is a catalyst for our DNA. It is a catalyst for the rise of rapidly rising or elevating our consciousness. So you realize that when people have the freedom to pursue their passions and their talents and their artistic expression, because that's what it is. Whether you're a scientist or a musician or a baker, you're expressing your creative abilities, your talents that you get from the creator or wherever it may come from. And so now you're expressing these talents, which is what drives your soul. You're driven. You're everything. Every cell in your body resonates because you're vibrating at a high energetic level. You're creating. And that allows you, without the stress and the anxiety and the struggle to survive, that allows your DNA to probably start reactivating itself a lot quicker, from what our latest understanding is of what's happening to our DNA. And obviously, the more of our DNA that kicks in, the more we allow our higher thoughts to be formulated, and that creates a feedback cycle. So the more we think about higher consciousness things and thoughts, the more it feeds back and reactivates and stimulates our DNA. That activates more and allows us to think higher thoughts. So it becomes a self-driven and a self-expanding prophecy and an expansion of our consciousness that will rise very, very rapidly in such a community.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So I know that you worked to go through the election process in South Africa in an effort to further the goals of Ubuntu. What did you learn from that? How did that go?
Well, first of all, let's be very clear about this. We didn't enter the elections because we believe we're going to win. We entered the elections because I understood that on the political platform, we can reach a lot of people that may not otherwise hear about us. Some weird little left-wing movement that tries to remove money from the system, But the moment you put it onto a political platform and you turn it into a political party with a manifesto and a plan of action, suddenly people look at you slightly differently. So I did that because I really just wanted to inject a seed of consciousness into the political beast and allow more people to discover the philosophy of Ubuntu and contributionism and the Ubuntu movement. And that's worked very well because it has created a lot more awareness. People in different communities are now going, wow, we love this idea. We want to implement some of these ideas on a small scale and start doing things for ourselves and start uniting people in our community. So that worked very well. However, what I did realize in the national elections in 2014 was that it's pointless going after the national elections and going for parliament and government and seats in parliament, because that's actually a waste of time. Even if you do get 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 seats in government, what are you going to do? You're going to go there and your members are going to sit there every day, listen to the garbage they talk in these parliamentary sessions. It's just absolute nonsense, all to uphold the corporate control over humanity and the country, and nothing to do with actually benefiting the people of their country. And I realized that we should look at the opposite side of the political spectrum, and that is the municipal elections, or the people at the municipal level in the smallest form of the political field, and that is the municipal elections at the town and the mayoral level. Because once you have a small town and a mayor and a council that like this idea, that want to implement this, and you got a consensus from the community that we're going to turn our town around and we're going to implement this plan of action, there's very little that the central government can do from stopping the people in that small town from implementing this and turning their town into a paradise virtually overnight, very, very quickly. And that became, I guess, I call it an aha moment for me, a moment of enlightenment, where I realized that it's the smallest towns and the little villages that will become the Achilles heel for the large governments. And it became our philosophy that is now called one small town can change the world. So we implemented that in the South African elections in 2016 on the 3rd of August. And we were in 13 municipalities, which was about 60 small towns. And we did our best, we went out there and we campaigned and we shared the philosophy and so forth. And it was already too much. It was already too big. But nevertheless, we created a huge awareness throughout South Africa. And there were many other towns that wanted us to be present there, but we just didn't have the funding and the labor force and the people to go and support it. But what we now have is that what's come out of that is that the one small town strategy and the plan of action to implement that one small town has become very well defined. We've learned from our experiences, and we've put together a very simple plan of action of how to take a small town and begin the process of converting it in a very simple step-by-step plan of action into an Ubuntu contributionist community where everything belongs to the people, everything they do belongs to the people, and they have complete control of what goes on in their town, and they benefit from the outcome of everything they do. And the very important thing to add to this is that it's going to take money to create a society in which we no longer need money. So what actually happens is that in a weird kind of twisted, macabre way, capitalism will become the tools that actually undermine and destroy the money system, which is actually unimaginable to anyone. And it took me a long time, many years, to figure this out.
So if I'm getting it right, then the money that you raise would go maybe towards getting people elected in particular small towns. And then once they're in place in those city councils and as mayors, they can create that Ubuntu community that you're envisioning.
Absolutely. The mayor becomes the driver with the people of the town. If you just go onto our website and you look the plan of action for the one small town, it's spelled out very, very clearly. So everyone can go look at this. And it's just such a simple process. Mm-hmm. In essence, what you do is you take money and you set up businesses, which we call community projects. But those businesses are run and controlled by the people of the town and owned by the people of the town, together with the investors that invested into those businesses. And you make sure that you run those businesses better and more slick than any other business of that kind anywhere else. Because the money that comes in from those businesses go into, first of all, maintaining and upgrading the existing businesses and more community projects. It pays the dividends to the investor, and then the third portion is broken up into three parts. And the third portion is then paid out to the people of the town and the community equally. So, to start off with, you think, wow, how is this going to work? Well, everybody contributes 3 hours a week to one of these community projects or businesses that belong to the people of the town. So if you have a town of 10,000 people, everyone contributes 3 hours a week. you have 30,000 hours of labor force every week. That's insane. That's an insane amount of labor that you've just gained from everyone just contributing 3 hours a week. The large corporations of the world can't even compete with your little town's labor force, just like this, overnight.
Wow.
So you can imagine how much you can do as a small town of 10,000 or 5,000 people by setting up, say, 50 small community projects or businesses. Everybody works for 3 hours a week in one of those businesses. It doesn't matter. You don't have to work 3 hours in each one of them. You just contribute 3 hours a week to one of them. So each business is run and managed as a normal business would, with a project manager, with a specialist in that field, with some people that are already trained in that area. They are paid a salary to do those jobs, right? So we can't go from zero to hero overnight, but we certainly can create the foundational pillars upon which this future moneyless society is going to be built. But we're going to do it with money and creating so much money for this community that we don't know what to do with all that money. Now, keep in mind, the more successful these businesses are, the more money they make, the more money we distribute back to the people, right? You understand that, right?
Yes.
So the more money our community projects make, the more money we constantly feed back to the people. What do the people do with that money? Nothing. Everything is free. Remember, as long as you contribute your 3 hours a week, everything is free. Your electricity, your water, your food, your clothes, your furniture, your computers, whatever we build in our community projects is free to the people. So now you're making all this money and you got nothing to use it on. And it's at that moment that people realize we don't need money. We need each other. So money does nothing. People do everything.
That is brilliant. And that's very clear. Thank you for spelling it out that way. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. It's really that simple. And this is, Janice, when I tell people, I tell them just go on our website, do some research, watch the material, and it'll come to you. It is so simple, but you've got to just get out of the box of constantly putting restrictions and hurdles in your own way. Just open up your mind and imagine any possibilities. Anything that you can imagine is possible.
So does the U.S. version of this differ in any way than what you just described?
No, not at all. Okay. At this stage, we have potential small towns in the USA, in Canada, in Brazil, and more countries are starting to resonate with this. And we never know where the first small town is going to come from. And no matter where it is, it does not matter where it is, because it is like a quantum energetic effect. At the moment we get that first small town up and running, it will create a knock-on effect around the world.
Yeah.
Before, and it's not a matter of making it a successful model. It's just a matter of starting to get the imagination of the people around the world awakened and allow them to dream and imagine the possibilities of what's possible when we start to do this kind of creating this kind of reality for ourselves. And then you see how quickly things begin to change, because the moment the first mayor of the first small town goes out there and starts to put out the public notices and the press releases of what we're doing in our town, what we're planning to do, what our vision is and our intention is, and inviting the healers and the inventors and the engineers and the artists into their town to come and share their skills with the town. And whatever, if you can create a free energy device, come to our town. You will be given whatever laboratories or research facilities you need so that you can make your technology work. If you can cure cancer, come into our town. You can work in our hospital and start curing cancer in our hospital or our new healing center that we've created. So just use that as an example. How long will it take for our little town to have a free energy device when we invite all the inventors there that have those capacities? It's going to be very, very quickly before very soon we'll have our own free energy device. And everyone knows that that's possible. It's been done many times before. How long will it take before our little hospital or healing center starts curing cancer? In no time at all, because we know cancer can be cured and all diseases can be cured. So now the next question is, how much money do you think our supercomputer factory will be making? And how much money do you think our hospital will be making? Because that's another community project. Remember, your hospital, your healing center is a community project. It's one of the community's businesses. How much money do you think we'll make in our little hospital from curing cancer. So we can turn over R1 billion in our little hospital every year. And that's just one of our community projects. So now you can start standing back and being absolutely gobsmacked by the amount of money that our small community will make. It's a stupefying amount of money that we can make if we just collaborate and work together and implement this plan and the strategy. And the more stupefying thing is that we have nothing to do with that money. We'll have absolutely nothing to do with it. We won't know what to do with it.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. We've come to the end of our hour here. I don't want to take up all your time here. I really appreciate you coming here and sharing this information in so clear a manner and kind of walking us through, because I think a lot of times there's ideas out there and we're all kind of charmed by them, but it's hard to understand how they'll work. And like you said, it's so important that we're able to kind of envision these things, because that's how we're able to manifest them. And I think that was the biggest reason why we've never done this stuff before, is because we have not been able to imagine anything other than what we have now. Yeah. So yeah, it's huge. How can people learn more about or get involved with Ubuntu?
Well, Janice, we have more and more Ubuntu teams, management teams that are being set up in different countries, which is now a big relief on me, because it's just, I've had to deal with all the emails and the communications over the last few years, and it's just become completely unmanageable. So it's a great relief. People can just go to ubuntuplanet.org. Mm-hmm. ubuntuplanet.org. Our new website should be up and running very, very soon, within days, which will also allow different countries to run the Ubuntu Planet website in their own language and to their own people in their own country, and then just reach out to the management team and the coordinators of the country. In the USA, it's very simple. The details of the USA management team is on the website already. So go
and
there.
We did have Brandon Shelton on the program a few weeks ago, kind of sharing a little more about that. So I'll link to that show.
Yes, exactly. And Rebecca Gretz is the new national coordinator, and Brandon Shelton is the project manager, and there's one small town driver in the USA.
Okay. Well, thank you very much again, and best of luck to you in what you're doing. I think you're going to have a lot of people getting on board pretty quick here.
Well, I believe so. The indicators there already. People are waking up and they realize that this is definitely a plausible and a workable model, so they get very excited about it.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly what we need now, new ideas. Thanks for joining us on the Sustainable Living Podcast. For more sustainable living tips, join our Facebook group, Sustainable Living Tips, Tools, and Tactics, and follow us on Twitter.